Alright, students, we're going to work today on one of the most important building blocks of working with sentence structure, which is identifying dependent and independent clauses. The most important things to remember are that clauses are groups of words and they contain a subject and a verb. It's whether they're a complete thought or not that makes them dependent or independent. Think about it. If you're independent, you can stand alone. That means you must be a complete thought. If you're dependent, it means you need something else to make you finished, which would make you, a dependent clause. So look at the group of words we have at the top. It's a clause because it has both a subject and a verb. So I've got the girl, that's my subject, ran away, that's my verb. The question is it a complete thought? Yes, it is. The girl ran away. It could be a whole sentence. So it's an independent clause. It can stand by itself. But this would be really easy to turn into a dependent clause. A lot of times people think that dependent clauses, because they can't stand alone, they must be shorter. In fact, it's often the other way around. It's often longer because you're adding a word. The girl ran away is independent. But if I do this, if I say, because the girl ran away, all of a sudden it doesn't feel finished anymore, does it? This word here is called a subordinating conjunction. We talked about those in 7th grade. Remember, they were awubis words. Those words, when added to an independent clause, they make it where they need other words to be complete. So, because the girl ran away, it still has a subject and a verb, but that subordinating conjunction makes it weak or dependent. So we're going to practice that in IXL for a bit here. Let's take a look. Swan Lake and the Nutcracker are renowned classical ballets that audiences have adored for more than a century. I'm looking for the dependent clause, and it's going to start with an awubis word or oftentimes a word that makes it a relative clause, like the word that. That's kind of a big clue, but let's just take a look at it separately. I'm going to look for subjects and verbs. I see are. What are? Well, Swan Lake and Nutcracker are. And it looks like it must stop here. Swan Lake and the Nutcracker are renowned classical ballets. That's got a subject, it's got a verb, and it's a complete thought. So it is not dependent. But let's double check. That audiences have adored for more than a century. Have adored is my verb. Audiences have adored is my subject and my verb. The that makes it a relative clause. It has to exist in relationship relative to the first clause. So this one here is my dependent clause. I would choose the second one, and then I would hit submit. Here's another example. Assateague Island is the home of the free-roaming, undomesticated horses that author Marguerite Henry describes in her book, Misty of the however you say that word. So I'm going to look for where it breaks, and it feels like here. You just kind of have to hear that. So Assateague Island is the home of the free-roaming, undomesticated horses. I see my verb. What is? The island is, so it's a clause. There's no subordinating conjunction here, and it can be a thought by itself. So this first one is my independent clause, but let's just check that second one. That author Marguerite, well, I see the that right away. So I know that's going to be dependent. So I would hit the first one is my independent clause, and I would move on. Now, always make sure you watch the prompt. We're looking for the independent clause here. If a word is spelled the same forwards and backwards, for example, civic, rotator, radar, kayak, or deed, it is known as a palindrome. So as I read, I kind of marked where I thought the clauses split, and I'm going to check each one. First one, if a word is spelled the same forwards and backwards, is a verb, word is my subject, but this word at the beginning, that's an awubis word. That's going to make that first one dependent. The second part, it is known as a palindrome. Well, that feels independent, but let's check it. It is known as my verb, it is my subject, no subordinating conjunction at the front, it's a complete thought, that is my independent clause. All right, looking for independent clause again, and this one's trying to make it really long so it confuses us. During her tenure as First Lady, now here's the thing with this one, you might think that it's going to break there, and it would for a phrase, but during her tenure as First Lady, that doesn't have any verb at all. So it's not a clause. We can consider it part of the next group of words, so there's no break right there. During her tenure as First Lady, Lady Bird Johnson initiated a program for the beautification of areas near highways and in national parks because she loved natural landscapes. All right, I'm just going to go with the shorter one because that seems easier to start with. Because she loved natural landscapes, I see she loved as my subject and verb, and I see a subordinating conjunction, which means that's dependent. So the first one's probably independent. Let's look for it. During her tenure as First Lady, Lady Bird Johnson initiated a program for the beautification of areas near highways and in national parks. That's a complete thought. And I see Lady Bird Johnson initiated, my subject and verb, check, independent. Again, the independent clause. The hand, a 4-inch unit of length, has traditionally been used for determining a horse's height, which is measured from the ground to the top of the horse's withers or shoulder area. So we're going to look at where it breaks up, and it is going to do it like this. The hand, a 4-inch unit of length, has traditionally been used for determining a horse's height. There again, with all these commas, you could think you're splitting it at different places, but remember, the clause has to have a subject and a verb, so let's find it. The hand has been used. That's my subject and verb, and there's no subordinating conjunction here, and it is a complete thought, so this is actually my independent one. Let's just double check the second one. Which is measured. Whenever I see a which, I know that's another type of that subordinating conjunction, and it's not going to be a strong or independent clause, so I would click the first one, and I'd move on. After a lightning bolt passes through the air, the compression and subsequent rapid expansion of the air molecules produces the booming sound of thunder. I felt the split happen right about here, and I'm going to check it. Lightning bolt passes is my subject and verb. It starts with after, which is a subordinating conjunction, so this is a dependent clause. Check the next one. Compression and subsequent expansion of the air molecules is my very long subject. And it produces, that's my verb. This second part, it could stand by itself. It is an independent clause. So I would choose the first one, click it, and move on. All right, let's do one more. We're looking for the independent clause. If a king cobra is provoked, it will produce an intimidating hiss and lift 1/3 of its body upward in confrontational manner. It splits here. This one's a nice and simple one because I didn't try and throw in little phrases to confuse us or other kinds of commas, but just watch for that. Watch for what are the two thoughts in the sentence. And it's nice in this IXL, they only ever give you 2 thoughts. This could happen with a dozen. They're being nice to us today. So, if a king cobra is provoked, I've got king cobra is provoked is my subject verb, and it starts with if. If is a subordinating conjunction. So that's my dependent clause. And the second one's going to be my independent clause. One thing that I would recommend to you is to get a list of those subordinating conjunctions, especially the awubis, and have that in front of you while you do this if you're still stuck. So that's something you can look up on your own because you are resourceful students that way. But good luck and have at it.